Good morning, my name is Josh from Cyclones Oz, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Gulf of Carpentaria system. It's now over the Gulf of Carpentaria, just to the south of Groote Eylandt, and we're expecting it to develop into a fully fledged tropical low, designated and trackable tropical low by the end of today, and we could be seeing a tropical cyclone develop out of this as well come around Friday time, and we'll also be seeing this track across the Northern Territory and likely into Western Australia as well, so it's going to be a long tracking system, albeit at a remnant low intensity. But what it does towards the end of next week could get very interesting. So all of that, plus a detailed forecast on this system upcoming in the next 15 minutes. Make sure you stick around to the end, and if you are brand new here, then please do consider subscribing. So we're going to take a look at the infrared satellite imagery. Oh, it's really not liking me, this satellite imagery today. I've spent about 5 minutes trying to boot it up, but you can see if we were to go to about, I'd say maybe 2-3 hours ago, before it really did quit on us, this satellite imagery, you can see there's a lot of strong thunderstorms, especially to the north of the Northern Territory, up north of Arnhem Land, and these are streaming into the Gulf of Carpentaria through the Arafura Sea and into sort of the Cape York Peninsula. In locations around Weipa down towards Karumba. There's a lot of thunderstorm activity now where the cursor is. This is just to the south of Groote Eylandt, which is actually where the centre of the system is. You can see that right here. The centre of the storm will probably be around here where the cursor has been placed. Now that is over water. It's only about 20 kilometres away from the coastline of the Gulf of Carpentaria, but it's still over water, which means that this system can now intensify with no interference from land areas. The centre of circulation is still elongated. That means that it's quite stretched out, and we don't like elongated centres for tropical cyclones, so it's going to have to tighten off this centre and make it more sort of circular, and until it does that, it's unlikely to strengthen it too much. We'll take a look at wind observations real quick. You can already see up towards Cape Wessel, we're seeing some relatively strong sustained winds gusting up to around 70 kilometres an hour up there, and these strong winds are streaming into the Gulf of Carpentaria. We're not exactly seeing these strong observations yet for locations such as Weipa or Aurukun, but we'll likely be starting to see those later today as these thunderstorms start to stream ashore, which have some very heavy rainfall in them, mind you, and I'll be breaking the rainfall forecast down in some quite great detail as well, because that is the most significant threat from this tropical cyclone as it develops. Now down here at Centre Island, we've got winds from the southeast at 33 kilometres an hour. That is quite weak winds for a tropical low or tropical cyclone, but considering that these winds are streaming off land, I'd go as far to say that they're quite strong winds. They're a lot stronger than what I was expecting, and that's telling me that this tropical low is more developed than what we've initially thought, and you can already start to see these southerly and these easterly winds, which are quite strong, meaning that this storm has a defined centre, albeit being an elongated centre, but it still does have that defined centre, and it really is developing quite nicely this time, quite a lot better than I initially thought. I was expecting this to really take its time to develop, but it looks like it's doing it about 12 to 24 hours faster. Now, let's take a look at the forecast models here. Well, first of all, we're going to take a look at how the wind observations actually match up with forecast wind speeds, and they don't. Winds are about 50% stronger than what they've initially been forecast to be by the forecast models. Now, this is a big deal because when wind speeds are stronger than what they've been forecast to be, especially close to the centre, it means that the models haven't done a very good job at initialising the system. And generally, when they don't do a good job initialising the system, you get some pretty shoddy forecasts. I would go out on a limb and say the Access G3 is probably the closest in terms of wind speeds to the actual intensity and the strength of this tropical low in terms of peak wind speeds and wind gusts. But the Access G3 model has been the most bullish on all of the forecasts so far, so it's not exactly the forecast model that I would like to follow. I generally like to go with a blend of all four forecast models. It generally gives the most accurate picture in terms of what happens. But again, the forecast models and the Bureau of Meteorology have been all but good this tropical cyclone season. So it just comes down to a matter of preference at the end of the day. So now, as we play this through Wednesday and Thursday, you can see we see some strengthening come around Thursday evening. It really does take its sweet time, and it hardly moves until about Thursday evening when we start to see this little jog towards the north. And then through Thursday evening and Friday morning, it should intensify somewhat before making landfall around Robinson River or Boojum sort of area on Centre Island. And yeah, it will probably be very close to cyclone status at this point, with peak winds of around 50 to 60 kilometres an hour, probably at a very strong tropical low strength, but wind gusts will probably be approaching sort of that 70 to 80 kilometers an hour for some locations. Mornington Island should probably get 70 to 80 kilometer an hour wind gusts. So if you do live on Mornington Island or anywhere between Burketown over towards Centre Island and Baroola, I would be expecting damaging wind gusts at this point. Destructive wind gusts, probably not, but damaging wind gusts are very possible as this tropical low moves ashore. But like I said, the rainfall threat is the most concerning. We'll just quickly get through the wind forecast. Both the ECMWF and the GFS are very similar in terms of timing and also intensity. It's just the Access G3 model which is the big outlier in terms of peak wind speeds, which I just did cite something interesting with the GFS. It has actually upped it to cyclone status, which means it's probably going to be a little bit stronger than Category 1 status as it makes landfall just on the Queensland Northern Territory border. So there's been a bit of an uptick in tropical cyclone intensity over the past 12 hours, and that's something we'll need to be watching as well. The Access, however, still always calling for the strongest intensity forecast. You're looking at probably a Category 2 or Category 3 strength severe tropical cyclone here, with peak wind gusts approaching 125 kilometers an hour. So yeah, destructive wind gusts can't be ruled out. They're still possible, but they're not looking as likely as what we initially thought with the intensity of this tropical cyclone, and apologies to the birds this morning. They're quite loud as well as yesterday. Now we're going to take a look at rainfall, because rainfall is definitely the most significant threat from this tropical cyclone. I've been talking about this for the last couple of days. We're going to use a blend of the ECMWF and the GFS forecast for the rainfall run. The Access has just been way too bullish on the forecast for my liking, and I reckon the ECMWF has got it spot on here. Now, like I've been saying for the last couple of days, around Corumba and Burketown up to 400 to 500 millimeters, especially anywhere towards or immediately towards the east of the landfall site, you'll be receiving the most significant amounts of rainfall. And then as you get further inland as well, you'll be seeing widespread accumulations above 150 millimeters and isolated pockets of 200 to 300 millimeters. And as you get inland into the desert, the rainfall become more sporadic and more hit and miss, but you could still be receiving locations that get up towards 300 millimeters and others up to around 100 to 150. For major, well, not major population centers, but for major locations such as Katherine, you're looking at about 150 millimeters. As you get inland towards Wave Hill, maybe about 200 to 300 millimeters. Down towards, I guess, Docker River, which is further down here, maybe about 200 to 300 millimeters as well. There's a spot here just towards the east of Balgo Hill up to 400 millimeters. I think that might be a little bit outlandish at this time, but once again, it's been reciprocated on other forecasts, so it will be something we need to be watching. Tennant Creek should miss out on the worst of the rainfall, but still up to 60 or 70 millimeters there, and Corella Creek up to about 150 millimeters for that location. So a significant amount of rainfall can be expected, and as you get into Western Australia as well, the rainfall doesn't ease off, up to 300 millimeters for some locations dotted around the Kimberley region, and then down towards Broome as well, maybe 200 millimeters. And look at this track here. This is telling us that we're seeing a tropical cyclone re-emerge off the West Australian coastline, and it goes right into Port Hedland by the looks of things, or maybe around Karratha or Roebourne, that sort of area. I'll just turn these wind observations off because they are quite annoying. But as we get into I think it'd be next week, later next week, Wednesday and Thursday, we're looking at this re-emerging off the coastline and intensifying very briefly as it kind of just hugs the coastline next Thursday and Friday before making landfall on top of Port Hedland as a Category 1 strength tropical cyclone. That is something that's been said for the last about 24 hours, and it's definitely a forecast that we have to be watching over the coming couple of days because it is a very possible scenario as well. Now, I will just briefly recap what's going on over in the Gulf of Carpentaria, because I feel like I can give 8 minutes of good information, but it doesn't make sense if you guys get a 30-second summary on this situation. So I'm going to switch it over to wind accumulation to get a good idea of peak wind gusts. Around the landfall site, which would be for a location around Centre Island or Baroola and Robertson River, expect peak wind gusts of around 80 to 90 kilometers an hour. For Mornington Island, also expect peak wind gusts of around 90 kilometers an hour, and these wind gusts of around 70 to 90 kilometers an hour, they'll extend between the Queensland Northern Territory border through Burketown, Corumba, and up towards Arakoon as well, and maybe even up towards Weipa as well. And we'll also be seeing some strong wind gusts up around Wessel Island, or is it Cape Wessel or something, and Nullarbor as well, and maybe even for Groote Island, they could be receiving some pretty strong wind gusts as this tropical cyclone develops. So Also be expecting some very significant rainfall totals as well. As you get inland, there'll be accumulations approaching 300 millimeters for locations. This will push rivers towards the minor or moderate flooding alerts, and maybe even one or two rivers might get up towards the major flooding alerts. So if you live in a flood-prone area or you have property or livestock in a flood-prone area, it's a very good idea to spend today and tomorrow preparing for it, because Friday and Saturday will be the wettest days of this tropical cyclone. Then you'll be looking at around Saturday to Sunday as this system heads inland through Tennant Creek and across to, say, Twin Hills Village, inland into the Northern Territory. So yeah, if you do live, especially in this sort of location here outlined by this cursor, I would be preparing for a very significant amount of rainfall, probably a 1 in 5 year weather event where you see totals about 300 to 400 millimeters. And once again, if it completely busts out and your location receives 100 millimeters and your rivers don't flood, it's just a lot safer to be prepared for a situation like this. I know it's frustrating to be told to be as prepared as possible for a system like this, and then for it to completely bust out. That's very frustrating, and I do feel for people that have had that before, especially with Cyclone Kirrily. But once again, it's just way better to be on the cautious side of things, because you'll save your livestock, you'll save your property, and you'll save a hassle with insurance companies as well. And if anything, that is certainly worth it. Insurance companies are probably the most stuck-up people that you'd ever want to deal with. But yeah, just be preparing for a lot of rainfall, be preparing for quite a gusty night, I would say. Winds shouldn't be the worst case scenario in this system here. It's mostly going to be rainfall. Once again, if I was to switch it over to rainfall accumulation, if you wanted to grab a screenshot of this image, blues indicate more than 100 millimeters, purples indicate more than 200 millimeters, and pinks indicate more than 400 millimeters. When you're seeing widespread swathes of purples, you're looking at 200 to 300 millimeters, maybe even 300 to 400 millimeters. But through here, I mean, I'm just seeing very hit and miss rainfall through the Northern Territory, so it is quite a difficult forecast to make in terms of peak rainfall, and there's different model scenarios throughout through different models. The Access G3 is still calling for this system to cut through the heart of the Australian outback, whereas the Eastern Relief, I think, might just be the most reliable forecast that we can take here, and we will know for sure what forecast is going to reciprocate by around Thursday or Friday, which I know is frustrating because it only gives about 1 or 2 days to prepare. But I would say anywhere expecting a significant amount of rainfall, and you can check this information out with the Bureau of Meteorology as well. Just be preparing for a flooding situation because it could get quite nasty. Now let's take a look at the rest of Australia. Now, of course, of the west and the south, it's looking relatively dry. Victoria got blasted by thunderstorms yesterday after one of the hottest days that they've had there all year, and they're also under a very significant bushfire threat right now, with bushfires raging in the east. The west of the state, rather, not the east. I'm getting my lefts and rights mixed up once again. And then also we're seeing some rainfall up towards New South Wales as well, associated with a bit of a cool change coming through. And central Queensland looks like they might receive a little bit of rainfall as well over the next week. I'm looking at a spot near Emerald up to 150 millimeters. It looks like we might be getting some pretty strong thunderstorms move through the area tonight and also into tomorrow. We could be seeing some strong thunderstorms up there, but they should ease off on Friday and by this weekend. The thunderstorms as well should also be around New South Wales and the Sydney area. You could be seeing some pretty significant accumulations inland around Penrith and so forth, and also on to around Thursday as well. Those thunderstorms should contract to northern New South Wales. Once again, it should clear up for Victoria. And if we were to take a look at fire dangers for Victoria, we're looking at probably a decreasing threat right now, which is some very good news indeed, because I mean, they've had a pretty brutal day yesterday in terms of fire dangers. Anyways, I apologise for the background noise. The sprinklers have just decided to come on unexpectedly. But yeah, that is all from this forecast update. If you did end up enjoying that, then please do consider leaving a like on the video, and also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. But that is all from me, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.